Hello. Welcome to our movie club. Today we'll speak about Chernobyl movie and I think about nuclear industry and nuclear disasters and everything. So first of all, what do you think? Should we discuss only one episode or we can like prolong this for how long? I don't know, 2 series or more. I know that Gerard watched only 2 series, right? 2 episodes.
One.
Okay. So So let's stay on one. It's the beginning of the story, I guess. Let's start with characters. There are many, and all of them have Russian names, so it must be hard for you, right? Dyatlov and Khrushchev and all these names. So let's call them just by their position, the main one, the second one, and so on. So let's start with the story. So Gerard, could you?
Okay. The story is about the Chernobyl disaster. I think it happened in 1985 or 86 or 85.
86, I guess, 86. But I'm not sure.
Yes. We can see one man in his 50s who recording some tapes to related about the incident. And those tapes, the time that it happens is in 1988. And then he eventually kills himself. He hides the tapes and kills
he committed suicide. Right? Committed suicide. And I guess it was like 10 years after the incident or more. Because
no, 10? No, I think 2 years after. 2 years only.
Maybe I'm wrong, Gerard, but I think he said something that he was condemned to 10 years in prison or something. So it's my impression.
His death occurs the day after the second anniversary in real life. Yes.
So maybe he got condemned. That's why he killed himself.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he was out on bail.
I'm not sure, guys, that we have this bail system.
Okay.
That we had at that time. But okay, I could be wrong.
Yeah, I know this actor. I know the actor that played this guy. I think he's British. He appeared in another famous TV series like Mad Men.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew the guy. So we can see the beginning of the incident and how the authorities of the nuclear plant ignored or wanted to dismiss the seriousness of the incident. No, it's not that bad. It's not. And it was very serious.
Yeah, but why they did so?
Because they were afraid that the power, the people over them could blame them, like the hierarchy of the communist system.
Yeah, but at the first moment, I got the impression that they just did not understand that. They just didn't understand because they know they read these numbers on the devices and they said it's not great, but it's not terrible. So they just ignore, the facts, I think, somehow.
Yeah, but the boss of the nuclear plant, I don't know, this guy was denying everything. They told him that the reactor core was blown up, and he wanted to believe that.
Well, I'm not an expert, first of all. So whatever I say, it can be wrong. So, but I read some articles. This movie, it provoked a lot of discussion in Russia, in media, in many articles, many people who was involved to this catastrophe wrote their books, and they say, this guy Dyatlov, who was in charge, he was not stupid one. He was a smart one, a physician, and he just ignored physicist, and he just was sure that nothing happened because it could not happen in his view of this process. So he just ignored it. It was wrong, and he believed it. So it was not just was not just ignored by purpose. He was sure that nothing bad happened, because it could not happen, because he had an instruction and he was a scientist, and he said at that moment this type of reactors, RBMK reactors, they were supposed it isn't possible to blow up. just because of physics.
They
Hello,
couldn't
teacher
blow up.
Lee. Hello, teacher Lee. Do you hear us?
Can
Yes.
you?
Yeah,
Yeah, we
nuclear
can-
plants
nuclear-
plants themselves can't blow up, but they do release hydrogen, so the hydrogen can cause small explosions,
Small explosion. Yeah.
but not nuclear.
So in contrary with the military, usually correct me, uranium or what they use?
Uranium.
Military bombs. Uranium.
Nuclear plants use uranium, but they use a very low concentration. They only use about 5% uranium, fissionable uranium. Nuclear bombs use like 95 to 99% uranium. So the nuclear power plant's concentration of fissionable uranium is very low compared to a nuclear bomb. That's why it's impossible to explode nuclear wise.
Yeah. So at that moment, this guy, he wasn't just ignoring this, I know it's blown up, but I don't want to admit it. No, he was sure nothing. It could not be blown up, something like this. So my impression.
It can't cause a nuclear explosion. That's correct.
Okay.
But as we saw in Fukushima and in Chernobyl, there are other things that can cause small explosions, non-nuclear. Chernobyl had what we call steam explosions. It had water heated up so fast and converting to steam so fast. Steam needs more volume than water. So when water was instantaneously converted to steam, it had the effect of what we call a steam explosion and blew the roof off. In Fukushima, they had a different design than Westinghouse, and they had a turbine building, and hydrogen gas, which is released from the water, hydrogen got up in the top of the building and a spark ignited the hydrogen. So they had a hydrogen explosion that blew the roof off. So they can have non-nuclear explosions due to gases and steam, but not due to nuclear. They can't have nuclear explosions. So the explosion is going to be very small, very localized, and no radioactive contamination normally, except for your design, which uses graphite. You guys have a terrible design.
Yeah, it was a mistake, but because this, it was like it wasn't an experiment, but it was like a new branch for reactors, as far as I understand. Okay. So something happened. This personal, how we call it, night shift or something. So there are a few people in this control room. They making some experiment, which is approved by whom? By, I don't know, higher, someone from high in hierarchy. I forgot. Hierarchy. Yeah. So they made an experiment and suddenly they lost control of the reactor. So control boards show some nonsense. They heard a sound that something blown up, and the story begin, right? So, and they at this moment they ignore the fact that core is melted in reactor. They say something wrong, but we don't know what is this. Something like this. Am I correct, guys? What do you think? Okay, let's go on with the story. So, Vasant, please.
The chief asked them to look at the core. And their fellow workers went to the core and they looked at it. It started glowing, but the chief didn't want to believe it. So he firmly believed that there's no chance for any explosion. So he denied the fact, and the board of directors conducted a meeting with the with authorities, I think, the shareholders or something. So they had a meeting in a room, and they also said that the radiation level is not that much hazardous. So, but actually, they had only a small device, so it can only measure up to 3.7.
Yeah.
And
Okay, yeah. Let's say that for a bit. So how we call this device, that used, that made to be used in, in casual circumstances, for home purpose or something like this, not for science. How would we call them? I have...
Gygometer.
Sorry?
Well, Teacher Lee is the expert. I'll leave it up to him.
Well, for home use in America, we have nothing. We don't measure radiation in America. Okay? Maybe y'all issue it to every Russian citizen, but we don't do that.
No, my question was different. I mean, there are like high precise devices for scientific use, right? And there is something primitive that you can use, in your normal life.
Yeah, we have. Yeah, there's several kinds of dosimetry that we use in the nuclear business. One is called a pocket dosimeter. It's about the size of your index finger. And it has a lens in one end, yep. And you hold it up and you look in the end and you'll see a little tiny meter. And it will read immediate instantaneous radiation level, but it's very, very low. It's just enough to say, whoa, I don't need to be here. I'm leaving. Okay.
And what will be the number? 5 Röntgen, or how much it will be?
We use Röntgen over here. We normally stay under 1 millirem or under 1 Röntgen. We keep, it's very low. I mean, we shouldn't be in a place it's very high.
Yeah. So, usually, I know that you haven't watched the movie, so let me give you some context. Immediately after the incident took place, they took these devices and said, okay, we can see that it's 3.6 Röntgen. So it's not good, but it's not terrible. What do you think? Is it terrible? 3.6?
No, that's not too, but it's not life-threatening or anything. You can stay there for a little while, but it's not a long-term. You don't want to stay there 24 hours a day, but for a temporary passage, that's okay.
Yeah. So they had reasons to say, it's not that terrible, right?
Right. If that's what they were reading, yeah. Now
exactly.
Yeah. Correct.
So it was the facts they had at the beginning, but after they found out that this device, this household device, has a maximum of 3.6. It just cannot show more,
Now, if it's maxed out, I would not assume it was reading the maximum. I would assume it might be much more than that, So,
yeah, exactly.
If it was maximum at 3 point whatever, I'd be concerned.
Yeah, I don't know why they did not, but probably they did not know about this, that it maxed it out or something like this. So it was a terrible mistake after all. But at the beginning, I think for the first 20 hours or more, everyone was calm. Just because, it's 3.6, we had some fire, let's call this, how we call them,
Firefighters?
Firefighters, yes, and everything will be fine. But after they tried to use this scientific purpose device to measure exact number, and this device just got broken immediately when they turned it on.
Wow. Run!
No, what they say? They didn't say go away. No, what they say? They say Moscow always send us shitty devices. We need another one.
Yeah, they blamed the device.
They blamed the device, exactly. Yeah, and only after military, how we call them? There was a department in military in the army whose specialization is working with contamination, chemical, nuclear, and all those things. How we call them? I have no idea.
Say that again.
There is a department in military, in army. There is a special sort of soldiers
Force.
whose role is handle, contamination, chemical, nuclear, and all those things.
Well, we don't have that in the military, but we do talk about NBC, nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare.
Okay, yeah. So they arrived and they had this device, and they measured it, and it was, Gerard, do you remember? 5,000 or something?
I don't remember how much.
Yeah, so it was like 5,000 rentgen per hour or something. So they said it's much more than Hiroshima or something.
Yeah, that'll kill you if you stay too long.
Actually,
yeah.
it kills you almost immediately if you go like in the cold, right?
Yeah, yep. That's very, very high.
Yeah. So only at that moment, after few days passed or 1 day passed, I don't remember, they finally find out that something bad happened. So that's a tragedy, I would say. And what they did, Gerard, do you remember when they found out?
But did that happen in the first episode?
Yes, I guess so. They had this meeting.
A committee.
A committee.
There was an old man that said, "What's the name of the nuclear power plant? Not Chernobyl, Lenin." You must have faith. You must have faith.
Well, I never, I'm too young to remember those times. And for me, it doesn't look very plausible, but it was sort of that, I would say. So it always, in any industry, in any, I don't know, in any plant, we have a few guys from a communist party. They were supervising the process. They had a direct phone to the central committee and so on. So just, supervising the whole industry. So probably that meeting was about this. And they decided not to let know anyone about this incident. Just to
not to warn anyone.
Not to warn anyone.
Yeah.
Actually, they it's hard for me to explain, but they try to to make a good face in a bad circumstances. So they don't want to spread information.
They tried to spin it, I suppose you could say.
Spin it, okay.
To spin is put a political spin.
Yep, yeah.
So at that time we had a president, Gorbachev, and we were in the period of our life when we tried to be friends with everyone, with Western guys, with everyone. And Gorbachev said, if we will publish this info, it will hurt our relationship with everyone. So let's just pretend that nothing happened. Why he said so? Because he was told that it's nothing terrible. It's 3.6. Don't worry. Everything is fine.
Everything will be okay.
Yeah. And it was a trap, actually, because after you deny it at the first day, you cannot say on the second day that, we have a terrible thing. So they...
Yeah. Fukushima, it always happens.
Yeah. And they decided not to evacuate. Can I say so? Not to evacuate.
Evacuate.
Evacuate? Okay.
Yeah. They just cut the phone lines and everything, and just pretend that everything is fine.
I was like, I can't hear you.
Okay. So, but after they found out that there are a lot of radiation, they started to form another committee in Moscow to handle the situation. And they called one guy, a physician. Right? Physicist, I always forget this. Physician is a doctor, right?
Yeah.
But this one, it's a physicist. Okay. A physicist who was a smart guy who was in charge in some institute. Sorry. Okay. And they started to handle the situation. So they got this guy, a scientist, and another guy who was I don't know name for this, but it was kind of a clerk in Communist Party with a higher rank. So he can
civil servant.
Civil servant. So he had a lot of like what we call this, a lot of authority, a lot of power to get whatever they need. So it was like a guy in charge who will supervise the scientists and will get whatever resources they need. Do you remember this, Vasants, about this physicist?
Yeah, I remember that guy.
His name was Sherbina, I guess. I'm not sure. Do you remember, Vasants, this subplot when they called the scientist and there was a meeting with the president?
He was like a fixer.
He makes things happen.
Towards the end, yes, somebody was talking to him. He seemed like a higher authority, and he didn't even give a chance to speak. And he was trying to say that the tiniest possible amount of radiation is hazardous, and everybody has to be evacuated, even at 3 point something rate. So, but the politician or the higher authority didn't seem to listen to him, and he threw the order.
Yeah, but this guy, the scientist, he was a scientist, a physicist. he was immediately worried just because of descriptions, how they give him papers about this incident. He was immediately like worried. He said, "What is paper contains a description of black smooth rock? What is this?" Usually, what is black smooth rock found by firefighter?
Graphite?
Graphite.
Graphite, exactly. Usually, what is bad? Why it's so bad if you found a graphite rock around the nuclear station?
Well, in American designs, we don't use graphite. Graphite is flammable, for one thing. It can burn.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want anything in our reactor core to be burnable. But graphite, in your design, you have graphite on the outside of the reactor. So if I'm finding little pieces of graphite throughout the plant, that means your reactor has blown up and it's in small pieces. That means there's radioactive stuff everywhere. And this graphite itself, because it's always around the reactor, it itself is radioactive due to long-term exposure. So if you're finding that spread everywhere, you've lost control of your protection from radioactivity.
Exactly. So you see, Teacher Lee found this puzzle immediately. So as this guy, I forgot his name, Legolasov probably, he immediately was worried. Why firefighters found graphite? It's mean that something terrible happened. And he told politicians, so, we can't ignore this. It will change the whole world, future. We need to solve this immediately. Actually, it was a risky move from his side, because these politicians, they are they had a high rank, and they don't like, I guess, to be interrupted with such things. But they sent him and another guy, functionary Sherbina, to the Chernobyl to find out the truth. And they went there by helicopter. Gerard, do you remember this?
No.
No?
That was near the end.
It was at the end, yeah, exactly, yeah. And Sherbina, the guy, the communist guy, he said, you have to teach me how reactor works. I want to understand. So
should have done that before the test.
No, but this guy was not in charge. It was just a random guy. Sherbina was just a random guy from Communist Party who got this task, just to handle this somehow. So he asked Legolasov, who was a scientist, just to teach me how it works. And let me rephrase what I got from this explanation. It was very brief explanation about how how it works. So, and it says, regardless of state, that we have some fuel running on something, and during some process, we have a fast participles, then
Particles.
fast particles, and move so fast that they have a lot of energy and move as fast as almost some, how we call it, some
Speed of light.
on the speed of light, yeah.
Mhm,
And
yep.
when they hit each other, we have a lot of energy, a lot of heat.
Yeah. When they collide.
But when they collide, yeah, we have a lot of energy. But because there are not many such particles,
Particles, correct. yeah,
Particles.
Particles.
some of them just does not hit anything.
Yeah, they miss it.
Yeah, they miss each other, and they should be stopped outside the reactor. They should not leave the core, and for that purpose, they use graphite that that cover the core and stops all the particles. Teacher Lee, is it correct somehow?
Yes, basically, the graphite is used to slow down particles and provide shielding.
Yeah, so it's a shield. It's a shield for a reactor, right?
It reduces the radiation level by factors of 10.
How much? For how much factors of 10?
Depends on how much graphite you have.
In the movie, it was that much, I guess. So this
Yeah.
rolls.
Yeah, graphite, I don't know. We use lead.
Mhm.
2 inches of lead reduces the level by 1/10. So if we put 4 inches of lead, we reduce it by 100th. If we use 6 inches of lead, so the more you use, the more tenths you reduce the level by. It never goes completely to zero because, as you said, some particles will miss everything and go through. So the best we can do is reduce it by a factor of 10 and another factor of 10 until it's so low that it's not a concern. So the graphite, in your case, served 2 purposes. One was shielding. Another one was the neutrons, when they're born from fission, they're going very, very fast. And it's kind of weird, but fast neutrons won't cause much fission. But if you slow down the neutrons by letting them bump into graphite molecules over and over and over and over, they'll lose energy and start going slower and slower and slower. And when slow neutrons enter uranium, it's very efficient at causing fission. So we call that slowing down of neutrons to cause more fission more efficiently. We call that slow down process moderation. So your graphite is a moderator to slow down neutrons to cause more fission, and it's a shield at the same time.
Teacher Lee, do Westinghouse use lead for moderation as well, or something else?
No, we actually use water. Our cores have water inside, and we use water, normal water, to moderate the neutrons. And outside of that, we have lead reactor vessel, a lead tank. And then outside of that, we have layers and layers of lead. And there's also a kind of plastic called I forgot the name of it. Well, it's polyborated. We've got all kind of stuff outside the reactor to give more and more and more shielding. And so then concrete is a shield. And our
polyborated, huh? Polyborated, you say. So
yeah, boron is a neutron absorber or a poison. So boron will suck up the neutrons and stop fission.
Okay.
So we use that outside the reactor. And then we have a building called the containment. This is what you don't have. We have everything inside a large bullet-shaped building called the containment that is 4 feet thick concrete walls with 1 inch diameter steel rebar. And if anything goes wrong in our system, it's all inside this gigantic building. So it's all contained. It can't get out. So when we had our 3 Mile Island disaster, yeah, the reactor melted and we had some hydrogen explosions, but it was all contained inside this building. Nothing got out. And yet in 1979, people were panicking. Oh my God! Oh my God! And physicists were saying, oh my God, we're going to have cracks in the roads for 10 miles out with the radioactive steam coming out. Oh my God. But in reality, everything was inside that building and the parking lot was safe. So our design with the building's very good, but you don't have that big building. So when your reactor in graphite blew up, it went to the atmosphere.
Okay, I see.
And that's why it was such a bad thing.
And Vasant, I'm very sorry. I had a chat closed, so I only now see that you wrote talk or something. If it's still, please. No? Okay,
Yes,
Tishili, I was going. Oh, please, Vasant.
Yeah. I was thinking about the elder guy in that meeting room, motivating all of them by saying motivational things about nation and their
National
tradition.
interest.
National. So yes, it happens at so many countries when the government takes some faulty steps, then they would cover it by saying that it's for the nation or something, so that the people would agree, people would just go with the flow, even if it's a bad decision. Like we had a demonetization a few years ago. They said that like it's for our nation. It's to reduce the black money, to reduce the counterfeits, to reduce the terrorism, whatever they want. But yes, it happens. They try to distract people from the bad decision.
I understand, yeah, what you're talking about. So I have a few words about this, this old guy in the committee. So first of all, in Russian tradition, we always, like have a respect to elders. So sometimes, if you're an old one, people will listen to you at least. So it's the first thing. So sometimes in the committees, in the, in this, what's the name for this members room? I don't know how it's called. In the companies, it's not only governments.
The boardroom.
Boardrooms, yeah, we have old people. So we believe that they have some wisdom. So we believe so. And another thing. So I forgot exactly what this guy talked about, but it was something motivational, as Vasan said. And at that time, in 1980 something, all generation they all had experienced the Second World War, right? So we had a special respect for them as well for that reason. For that reason, because they rebuilt our country from the scratch. Actually, rebuilt our country from the scratch in these years, from scratch. Yeah. So veterans, yeah, and
heroes.
And heroes, yes, actually, and because they had a very hard life, very they had to rebuild the whole country, so they were honored, I would say. So they had a lot of weight,
a lot of clout.
A lot of what?
Clout. C-L-O-U-T. Clout is a good word. It means power and influence. Clout.
Power and influence. Yeah. Actually, it was so. So, but there was another thing, because they because they had a lot of hardship in their life. They had wars. They just think differently. They don't care about one guy. They care about
they don't care about gay rights. No.
At all.
Oh darn! I was like, we'll use the LGBTQ people to go in there and grab that graphite and take it out.
Yeah.
Oh goodness.
Yeah. So probably that decision was very bad, but I understand why it was made. So he just actually could say, if people start panic, we will lose everything for nothing. We will lose their reputation and everything. So let's just be calm. Let's solve first. So can't afford to panic. Exactly. Okay. So where we stopped? So this guy, a politician, Sherbina, with a scientist, Legolasov, they went to this. Yes.
Didn't they fly? Well, okay, go ahead. Didn't they
Yeah,
fly
yeah.
over? Didn't they fly over the?
They tried.
They tried to fly over. Well, that's near the end, right? In a helicopter.
Do you remember after
Spoiler
the
alert.
Actually, this guy, this communist guy, he said, "I want to see everything with my own eyes."
My own eyes. That's it.
Yes. So go over this core. And Legolasov said, "No, we are not going to do this. We will die." And it was a high rare communist. He said, "We go." So
We are going.
or we are going, or I have to shoot you if you will try to prevent me. So, and Legolasov, a scientist guy, he said to a fighter, in one day you will beg for this shooting if you go there. So just don't go. You will die. But do you remember immediately after the blast, after the catastrophe, there were catastrophe. After the catastrophe, there were people, just strangers who watched this glowing.
Yeah, some in the near town, in a nearby town, they were watching it.
Yeah, nearby town. It's called Pripyat. They were watching some strange, how we call it? I don't know.
Clouds of glow. Yeah, there was a glow.
It was a glow. Teacherly, why there was a glow under the reactor, over the reactor?
Well, radiation is like it's gammas, neutrons, neutrinos. As they go through the air, they probably hit other atoms and cause electrons to get knocked loose. So they basically charge the air with plus minus particles.
A bit like the Northern Lights.
Yes, the Northern Lights.
It
ionizes the air, yeah.
Ionizing, right?
Yeah. Ionizes the air, yeah.
Can we say ionization? Like
ionization.
Ionization, yeah. Ions.
Okay, ionization. Okay, so yeah, so
what were they doing? Those people, they should have in their cars with the foot down on the pedal, foot on the gas pedal.
They thought it was the Northern Lights. Oh, we can see the Northern Lights today.
They said it's so beautiful,
But they knew it was the nuclear reactor. Most of them worked there. Their families worked there or something like that, right?
But there was a dialogue, and they said it's just a fuel by burning, so nothing important. Gerard, please.
Yeah, I'm surprised that the people from the city weren't scared. So a big fire in the nuclear power plant.
Exactly.
This beam, everything is okay.
I would have been out of there.
Fire in a nuclear power plant. That's something normal.
Let's go and have a look.
I have a few live evidences from people who lived there, whom I know, and they say it wasn't like in the movie. Many people fly away immediately. Many people even from Kiev. Kiev is far away from this place. But when people in Kiev have heard about this incident, they immediately fly away to Russia, to Belarus, to another countries, just because they don't want to experience anything. But in the movie, it's kind of different. In the movie they don't care, but it wasn't so in real life.
Okay, I believe.
So the people weren't as stupid as
the movie looked very stupid. Like they don't know what reactivity.
Well, not everyone went, of course. People, people were like working people who has jobs, they stayed. But people who can, they went away to different.
People who know better left.
And actually, I like this moment when, but let's, okay, I like this moment when Sherbina and Legolasov, they talk it, and it was a kind of dialogue. I forgot exactly about what, but scientists, he said to communist guy, to Sherbina, we will die in 5 years for sure. And that guy Sherbina, he was so like depressed because of that. He did not know that he's in danger because just being there. Yeah. It was interesting. Teacher Lee, if we return back to your explanation about this graphite and lead and all this
lead,
like lead and all these layers of defense. So, but and water inside the core. Am I right if I say that all these materials they got contaminated because of this process? This water, this lead, graphite.
That's correct. The things that are close to the reactor, due to exposure over time, themselves become radioactive. That's correct.
And what do you do with them after they got like contaminated? You change them or what? How you?
No, we use them. I mean, we know it's going to happen. Now, if we shut down the reactor forever, now that becomes radioactive waste. We can't just put it in a landfill because it's radioactive and it'll kill people. But we use things that are radioactive. As long as we don't go close to them, we're okay.
So these things, it stays with reactor like forever. Like when reactor works, it's the same thing there. I mean, I was asked about the water in the core. So water, it's the same water. It's a closed circle, right?
Right. Normally it's a closed circuit. We do have actually provisions for dumping radioactive water to the environment. What we do is we dilute it with clean water so that it's only a small part of radioactive water. So we dilute it and then we release it to the ocean or the ground, and it's considered safe. Okay. So we do have ways to get rid of it, but we also have ways to process it and remove the radioactivity and make it clean water again to reuse it.
Okay.
So we have many processes. Yeah.
And if correct me if I'm wrong. So when this shield of reactor was blown, so we now have the same reactor, but it now open to the to the atmosphere, and it continue to work and will work like forever, for thousands of years.
Right. The reactor itself shut down immediately when the explosion happened. But the material is radioactive, and some materials remain radioactive for 10,000 years. So even though the reactor is basically gone, all those pieces of debris are radioactive, and they continue to give off radiation. So that's why.
So it's just contaminated pieces. It's not reactor itself. Reactor is gone, right?
Correct. Everything's just contaminated, but it's all like a bunch of little radiation sources. Okay. And if you stand next to them, they'll kill you over time.
So all what you have to do, you just need to cover the thing with a new shield, with a new effective shield, right?
Right. So what they tried to do was send the soldiers up to the roof and collect all the debris into a big pile, and then they poured concrete over it to try to make new shieldings. I think sand initially, and then concrete.
It was boron and sand, but we haven't watched it yet. It will be in the future episodes.
Okay, yeah, and boron again, you add boron to stuff, that also absorbs neutrons, but it won't block gamma and other kinds of radiation. But by putting concrete over it, that provides shielding that reduces the radiation level by factors of 10 as you put more and more concrete on top. So at that point, the best they could do was to cover it up, because you can't get close enough to it to carry it away. You'll die before you get to it.
Probably in the movies they have a different story. I just pondering it now, and I think they said that after we cover it with boron, we will stop contamination for a moment, but then it will be heated up from outside. So probably reactor was working at that time, I guess. I'm not sure.
Well, no. With radioactive material, is unstable, and it gives off two things. It gives off heat and it gives off radiation. So it's kind of like a piece of coal. If you're grilling outside and you're using coal, you've got a big open flame, right? But when you put water on top of it, the flame will go out, but inside the coal, it's still hot. So radioactive material is kind of like that. The radiation, the radioactivity causes heat inside. So you can cover it up and remove the heat from the outside quickly, but over time, the heat from the inside will start coming out again. It's like it's the heat just continuing to be generated because of radioactive processes.
I see. So it was another problem, right? Because they said we will cover it, but it will melt down through this, I forgot how they call it, platform or something.
Right, we call it decay heat.
Decay heat.
The atoms will continue to split apart and split apart and split apart due to radioactive decay, and that process releases heat. So that's why if I shut down my reactor right now, it'll continue producing about 6% power for a short time. And then it'll put out 1% power, and then 0.1% power. And it takes a long time for all of the heat generation to stop because of these processes that continue in an exponential decay pattern. So it generates heat for several days after you shut it down. So we have to continue cooling it even after we shut it down.
For how long?
A week or two. Well, actually, for months. But it heats up slower. The more it gets cooled, the more you wait, the slower it heats up.
Yeah,
but we almost we always have cooling. Yeah.
One incident, when Sherbina called the president and said we need liquid nitrogen to liquid nitrogen to slow down the reactor. And president said, how much? He said, everything what we have in Soviet. And they got it. Yeah, actually, the whole country worked for this incident.
Wow, liquid nitrogen. I'd be concerned about that. That can freeze things and make them crack open. That's dangerous. Oh boy.
Okay, what I forgot about this episode? What happened else? Vasans, do you remember in this episode, the first one? I think we covered it more or less. So they went to this city, to Pripyat, to like the place, to Chernobyl.
Did the Belarusian nuclear physicist appear in the first episode? The woman?
Not yet, I guess.
Okay.
Not yet, but it was a funny and interesting for me episode when she appeared, because she did not have any information, any piece of information. She just calculated like a spy,
Well, she had readings. Didn't she have readings?
She worked in another institute in Belarus.
Yeah, in Belarus.
In another state. She worked in another nuclear institute. And she had few devices. And by reading these devices, she calculated that something happened exactly in Chernobyl. And she went.
Well, she worked it out. It had to be Chernobyl.
Yep. Yeah. And it was interesting when she called to her colleagues. Have you noticed this?
Nobody wanted to know.
Nobody
wanted to know.
Yeah, but when she spoke with them, what she used? She said, what do you think about my sister Barry or something? So it was a code. So they spoke about some sisters and nephews and called them by names, but those names was like B, boron, C, sand, What do you think about Sarah? And she said, yes, they use sand to to cover this. So it was interesting, like a spy story, But we can discuss it after in different episodes, because it's not there. Okay, so we finished with the story. I guess it's the beginning of the long story with many subplots and everything. So let me ask you first, did you know about this Chernobyl incident, and what did you know before this series, before this episode? Draft. Did you know about Chernobyl?
Yes, I know when it happened, because I think even some radiation arrived to Spain.
Probably.
Some animals, and it was a very important event.
Yeah, I can remember it happening too.
Where have you been at the time?
Me?
Where have you?
Where was I?
Yeah.
I was a teenager living in Ireland.
Me too.
Ireland. And you know about Chernobyl, and you what?
It was world news. It was a major story. It was as big as the Berlin Wall. I remember. Big news.
But was you allowed? Were you allowed to play outside?
Ah, yeah, of course. My parents kicked me out. Get out and play. Get some of that good radiation into you.
I am asking because in the movies they said, children in the Europe, they not allowed to go outside because of this. So.
Yeah, there was a lot of panic, all right, in BBC, as usual.
Sorry, I interrupted you. So.
Yeah, in the 80s there was a lot of fear of nuclear power.
Mm-hmm.
Although the ecologists were against the nuclear power. They say it's the sun, like a symbol with the sun smiling. Nuclear, no, thank you. Nuclear, no, thank you.
What about you? Did you know about Chernobyl incident?
Yes, once the TV series was launched, there were some
was released.
When it was released, there were some protests against the present nuclear plants and projects in India, especially in my state. So, because it triggered some set of events, and also it created awareness. I don't think it's the right time to do that, but somehow it created awareness to the people that something can go wrong, even if we have the perfect.
I remember that I was too young in 80s. I was like 6 years old, so I don't remember anything. But I remember that there are many people who participated in liquidation of this Chernobyl disaster. Many people in Russia, because they tried to reduce time that people spent on this site. So they sent firefighter from one region for one day, then from another region for another day. So in Russia, it was like 1,000 people who participated in liquidation. And everywhere in Russia, if you participated, you have a special rights. And it
Like
was
a badge, a special badge. I helped liquidate Chernobyl.
I survived Chernobyl.
Yeah.
It wasn't a badge. I don't know. You just
a special card you hand in. Free vodka.
Special rights. For instance, you have a few rights. First of all, you pay less for your taxes. You pay less for your taxes, and you never stay in the queue whenever it is. So
brilliant! It was a fast track pass.
Oh, yeah, cool.
Yeah, fast track for everything, and a few more privileges, but I didn't know.
Like what? A blowjob? Blowjobs.
Like tax reducing, and something else about money. I don't remember exactly. And
was it worth it? Do you think it was worth it?
At that moment, it was different. Terry, it was not like people were thinking that they are really saving the world. So they were not about. I did not go there. It was like your duty, or something like this. It was like a hero of war, or something related. I would say something comparable.
Someone had to do it.
Yeah. And I remember I was a young boy, and everywhere in the shops, in the supermarkets, everywhere, it was a writing, a new writing for us that, that veterans of Chernobyl has a priority, like it. And we all didn't know what is Chernobyl, why they have this priority, and I got explained it at that time. So it was how I learned about this like catastrophe.
Catastrophe.
Catastrophe. Something
Disaster.
Like disaster. Yeah. Okay, so everyone knows it's a big thing. Okay, let me read.
Yeah, it was huge.
I just mentioned that I remember Russia has a reputation for being secretive.
Yep.
I remember when it first happened, the first indication that something was wrong was Sweden.
I remember
Sweden, somehow they detected radioactivity in their milk from their cows, and then they checked the grass, and the grass was radioactive, and they're going, what the heck? And then I guess they looked at some readings and determined it came from Russia or Ukraine in this. Sorry, Ukraine, no blame on Russia. And they said, hey, USSR, what, y'all got a problem over there? And the USSR for like a week said, we've got no problem at all. The whole world is seeing this radioactivity spread everywhere.
Yeah.
And finally, after about a week or two, the Soviet Union said, okay, we got a problem. We need help.
That's true. Yeah.
And then and this happened recently. You remember about 3 months ago? Somebody in Ukraine or outside Russia had radiation readings, and they thought there was a nuclear explosion inside Russia.
Yeah, I remember.
Russia said, no problem, and we never did find out what that was.
Okay.
That was contained.
That was contained, yeah.
The information contained, but not the.
We won't know for another 2 decades what happened.
So not that soon, actually. Yeah?
Can you imagine if this event had happened in Europe or in America? People, would have been more crazy. A lot of people would have a very panic because they were more aware of the danger of radioactivity.
I mean, look at France. France has like 55 nuclear plants just inside France. If they were to have a nuclear disaster, it would just kill them.
The whole population.
Yep.
But their electricity is very cheap.
I imagine, yeah.
in France.
They send electricity to us in Catalonia.
They rent it. They sell it to you.
Yeah.
Spain has a fair few nuclear plants too, right?
They had it, but it shut it down, no?
I know. In Catalonia. Vandellós, Asco.
At least 5, I think.
5? Okay. I didn't know they had that many. Okay.
Well, I could be wrong. Gerard is the expert. He's
I know. I have several, but they want to shut down them. I don't know why.
Yeah, but answering your question, Gerard, I don't think it's about awareness of
danger.
Of danger. Yeah, I think that there are a lot of physicists in Russia, and they were aware about what is happening in general. So, but it's more about discipline and all those things. People just were told, everything is under control. We are taking care of it, and they used to believe. They used to like have
faith. They had faith.
Yeah,
they had faith.
Well, people panic when they don't understand something well. After Chernobyl, after Fukushima, Japan shut down all their nuclear plants, every single one, and kept them shut down for months or maybe even a year. Mm-hmm. Germany decided, we're going to shut down all our nuclear plants. Nuclear power is evil. We're going to shut it all down. California did that. California has shut down 2 nuclear plants. But what happens now is you've got to buy electricity from other people who use coal plants to produce electricity and pollute the air and contribute to global warming. But you feel good because we're not using nuclear power.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very, very complex equation. There are a lot of TED Talks, which I'm trying to make a discussion about this, and it's told I'm a scientist and I don't understand how can you be against climate change and be anti-nuclear.
Exactly.
So for scientists, it's something impossible. But for average people who never learn, physics and all those things. They think that nuclear is a pure evil, just,
Evil.
Yeah.
evil, pure evil,
Evil.
evil. Yeah. I will never learn.
I can't
Okay.
believe after Ronald Reagan, you never learned evil empire.
I learned it in Russian, actually, not in
Okay.
Okay, we have a few slides. Let's cover them as well. I hope, guys, that some of you enjoy this movie, and I hope you will return to the whole story. So if you enjoy this movie, just finish this whole episodes, and we will close the story itself. Because I found that the last episode is the best. That the ending of the story, when everything is how we say it, when you finish the puzzle.
Resolved.
Resolved.
Everything is resolved.
Everything is resolved. Yeah. Something like
You know, one thing that's funny, we had our 3 Mile Island disaster in 1979. We really never had any movies come from that.
Not
But
maybe a mini series. Was there a mini series about 3 Mile Island?
There
Or
might have been, but
straight
that's
to TV.
But that's factual.
Yeah.
But Chernobyl, we've got a lot of movies over here about the Chernobyl diaries and monster movies where they have tours to Chernobyl and these monsters are living there and they kill everybody. We've got a lot of horror movies that are based on Chernobyl.
It's understandable because it's evil Russians, so everything.
I guess so. Yeah, that must be it.
I have a question for Teacher Lee. Is that the worst accident it could happen in a nuclear power plant, blowing up the core?
Yeah, that's when it gets to the atmosphere, that's the worst scenario.
Mm-hmm.
That's why Westinghouse design is everything sends out of a huge containment building so that nothing can get to the atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
But the other designs that we're familiar with, they don't have that, so they can have things radioactivity get out to the atmosphere, and that's bad. Yeah, it can happen.
Okay, I'm starting sharing these slides. Can you see how
good fonts? Good font. Where did you get that font? I like that.
It's not me. It's Vasan's always, about
molten metal. Wow, molten metal and blood. All right.
Good job, Vasan.
Yeah. Vasans, when you tell us about your design school or something.
No, I try to find something flammable, a font. So I got this.
Tell me where you get your fonts, man.
That's all.
Okay, let's start with this one. Vasans, could you please?
This is the main character from the series, and he is listening to some recording. So this is the tape recorder. He is also recording something, and it's his kitchen.
He's recording his like diary, his explanations, what's happening on his version.
You can see a teapot, utensils, gas stove, and the tape recorder with the microphone and a timepiece.
Yeah, I think this guy was like sentenced, condemned because of this incident. And it's another cultural thing, In Russia, in Soviet Union, if anything bad happens, there will be a guy who will be in charge of it, who will be condemned to this. So, as we say, any bad incident at the end will have a name. So we will name one who will in charge of everything bad happened. So this guy was
he took the fall.
Took the fall, yeah. This guy, how we call it? I forgot. There was an idiom about a bus,
You threw him under the bus.
Threw him under the bus, exactly.
He was the scapegoat, the sacrificial lamb.
Yeah,
a patsy.
So,
Patsy.
So it's always happen, yeah. And he's sitting on the kitchen. I can see that exactly because I know this design. Design, it's like a government. How you call it? Terry, you remember we once discussed this Irish movie about Ireland?
Council housing, we call it.
Council.
I don't know if it exists in the States.
Yeah, it's the same.
Government built housing, council housing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so it's council housing. That's why I know this design. It's a very small room, small kitchens, and it's very poor looking. So it's a gas stove in the front of us, and we have a sink, right? It's a sink with water.
Sink and a faucet. Are those potatoes in the yellow container?
Yeah,
exactly.
I think they are.
Potatoes.
We wouldn't call it a faucet. We call that a tap.
Tap, same thing. Tap, equal
okay.
Faucet. Yeah. Okay.
And this sink on the wall, with small holes, it's to boil pasta in it. To not boil, but when you boil pasta, after you have to like.
Yeah, teacher Lee already wrote it.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't see chat. Sorry.
That's okay. So
He has been busy.
Lets the water drain out. Yeah.
Yeah, to drain is an important verb.
To drain out. Okay. Okay. Old style watch on the clock on the table. Yeah. And it's interesting.
And a lighter. And I see a packet of cigarettes and a lighter too.
Yeah.
Everyone smoked back then.
Yeah.
Everyone. It was like mandatory, I guess. But do you know what another small things over the kettle on the top of the kettle? You know what is this?
That's go on. It looks like a large spoon.
I can't tell. Yeah.
No, it's not a large spoon. It's a sink to make tea. You put leaves into it.
Tea.
Okay. Tea strainer, tea basket.
Tea basket, yeah.
Okay, all right.
I have an interesting anecdote. My uncle used to wet the tea. When I was a little boy, he would put the tea into the teapot, the tea leaves, and then leave it partially on the heat to wet the tea. I never understood as a kid. It's already wet. But he meant to brew the tea.
Okay. Now in China, they brew tea that way. They just put the leaves in the bottom of the pot.
Yeah. Well, that's what my uncle used to do.
Yeah.
We do the same. We do the same still. And it's interesting, but I know exactly everything on this picture because in Soviet Union we produced things always. There is a kettle in one design, and we produce it in mass produced million things.
But I heard a story that in the Soviet Union, planned obsolescence was not introduced into the products, so they lasted a lot longer.
Yeah.
That's true. Is that true or not?
I don't know. You have to explain me again because I didn't.
Planned obsolescence is when manufacturers insert some like a time defect. Yeah, a time bomb, exactly. Something will go wrong. Something will break after a certain amount of time.
Well, I don't know. I don't think that we had these time bombs in Soviet production. Because,
no, because it didn't make sense.
Yeah, because I still have, fridge from Soviet Union. It will work forever.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, so it is true.
Really, I have a bike made in 1940 something, and it will work for my grandson and forever. Everything made in Soviet Union will work forever.
That's amazing.
But now it's not true. When you buy a modern thing, you buy it for a few years.
Yeah.
Okay.
They just don't make things the way they used to.
Gerard, please.
We can see this guy in charge of the nuclear power plant in the middle.
He looks like a chef.
Yeah, the chef, the one that was denying that something bad happened. Because in his head, as you told us, in his head, he thought it was something impossible. So if something is impossible, it's impossible. Even if the facts say the opposite.
He refused to believe. Yeah, he refused to believe. He just ignoring the facts. Yeah.
All the time. Just in the last moment, he was dying from the radiation. But maybe at the last moment, he realized that something bad happened.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Any details?
These lamps, all lamps. How do you call these lamps over the desktop?
Desktop lamps.
You can see the controls, like a power plant. This chair that has wheels. How do you call that? A chair with
Just
wheels.
chair.
a rolling chair,
Rolling chair. Okay.
Or a swivel chair.
Swivel chair.
swivel chair. Yep.
And the clothes that they are wearing, like similar to the doctors.
Well,
Yeah,
they're
but-
filthy. They're filthy dirty anyway. They're really dirty.
It looks like
Teacher-
janitor
Yeah.
clothes to me.
Or asylum attendees. Attendants.
Teacher, do you have a special uniform for your nuclear industry? Something like
No, we just wear regular clothes.
Mhm.
Okay. But I don't know, but physicists in Russia, they used to have uniform like this.
Really?
Lab coat.
Lab coat, yeah.
No, we have lab coats, but that's just over your regular clothes. Yeah.
They look like pajama.
It looks
Yeah.
like pajama, yeah,
Yeah,
or
they do.
like they are cooking or like they are doctors or something. Yeah, but it's I don't know why it's part
Back
of tradition.
alley doctors, maybe.
I think it's because they try. I don't know actually.
Everything looks so dirty.
It's dirty, yeah. Okay, so it's a night shift. They're making this experiment. We can see control board on the right with many lights and how we call it, signals, green, red,
We would just call them
Buttons,
indicating lights.
indicating, yeah. And
Or
it's
status
I
lights.
believe it's a obsolete design, right, teacher Lee? It's,
It looks pretty old, yeah.
It would be all digitized, wouldn't it? Now.
Yeah. Today we got computer screens.
Yeah. Okay, let's go. Okay, the first victim. Let me describe this one. This guy was sent to see what is wrong with the core. So he went there. He have seen that there is no core at all, and on the way back, he's sad because he lost his strength, and actually he had this, how we call this, bruises, not bruises. He started to blood, right?
To bleed.
Bleed.
Looks like just bleeding through his skin.
Yep. It was so in the movie.
Wow.
Yeah, and his colleague, he was, I don't know, he was holding his head. Yeah, but I would not do so. I would be scared to
touch him.
Yeah, to touch him. Yeah, actually. Yeah. Okay, not too much here. Okay, firefighters. Vasans, would you?
Yes, this is where the firefighters enter the scene to cool down the fire, or set down the fire.
Put out.
And they put out the fire. And this firefighter took something strange on the floor, and it's graphite, so it started to infecting his hand. Even though he had a glove on his hand, the radiation affected his skin and his palm started to bleeding after that. He's wearing a helmet, hard hat. Which one?
They're helmets, aren't they? Teacher Lee?
Yeah, I'd call it the helmet. It might have a visor on top. I can't tell.
They have a neck protection at the back here, but they're definitely they're not hard hats, are they? They wouldn't be considered hard hats.
They don't quite look like hard hats.
No.
And these are fire-resistant clothes, right?
Right. Made of some rubber, I guess, or something. How we call this material?
Fireproof?
Asbestos. At this time they use asbestos.
Asbestos, probably. Yeah.
Now
Which is-
we don't.
Which is a hazard itself. Yeah.
Yeah. It's illegal now.
Yeah. Irony. Yeah. And this guy have a star on his helmet.
Yeah, I noticed that that's the Russian, the Ruski red star.
No, the reason is different. You know, the reason it's means that he's in charge of his small department. I don't know. He's
Department, fire department.
Oh, okay.
Not the whole department.
His crew. His crew.
His crew, like a few men, and he's one the main one.
Oh,
What's
see, I
he-
used to. Okay, go ahead.
Mhm.
Sorry.
And he has a hose, right? We call it hose in the
Mhm.
left.
Collapsible hose, yeah.
Collapsible hose. Pretty obsolete, but
No, we still use
Yeah,
those.
I was going to say they're not obsolete.
but modern hoses they look different. They look different. They had some like what's the word for this? Some circle inside, some plastic things that
To roll out.
roll out. Yeah, so it's kind
Yeah,
of
they-
automated.
We make them collapsible so we can roll them up on a spool and they don't take a lot of space.
That's
So
where
when you
it's
need
cool.
it, you just pull it out and unroll it. And when you put water pressure inside, then it inflates and becomes a regular looking hose.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, and this water that they spread to this roof after it became
Spray, maybe. Better than spread. Spray.
Okay, they spray, they deliver it to the core. It was a problem after, but I don't remember exactly how. So let's, and in Basan said, right, that it's a graphite in his hand. And actually in the movie, these firefighters, they start to feel bad immediately. Right?
Immediately, yeah.
Yeah. They sat down and like.
I think a few of them threw up.
Yep. And they had these red faces, right?
Yeah, like they had been sunburnt.
Sunburn, but it's the same, right?
Yeah, exposure.
Yeah, radiation. Okay, another view to this, to this building
Disaster
number
scene.
4. So, yeah, disaster scene.
Wow,
Any
what a
details?
mess. Oh my God.
So here is close to the reactor or not yet?
The firefighters had big balls. They were very brave, weren't they?
Or ignorant.
Oh, wow. They must
A
have
lot of
known.
faith, a lot of faith. He had a
they-
lot of faith in the system.
Yeah,
But
faith, yeah.
it's their duty, isn't it? So they do it every day.
Yeah, I guess so.
Discipline also.
Discipline, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah,
They were
but
doing their duty, but it must have been difficult, let's admit.
Of course. But it's it's a job that you choose, right? So it's not something mandatory. So
Yeah,
probably
but
it's a
you're to
special
put out
people.
fires. You're not to put out fires in a nuclear plant.
That's right, yeah. There's a difference.
An impossible mission.
Come on.
Okay, so a lot of debris, right? Fire on the top. We
Yeah,
can
debris
see this.
wreckage.
We can
Yeah.
pose and red cars.
Trucks.
With ladders, we call it ladder, right? On the top
Ladders,
of the car.
Ladders, yeah.
Well, not too much here. Let's move on. Okay. Vasans, any details? What you noticed? It's
The
a
director
director of station.
Station, and he was
Did
called.
Did every house, excuse me for interrupting, did every house in the former Soviet Union have wallpaper?
Oh, yeah. And not in the former Soviet Union, in the modern Russia as well.
That's one thing
You
that
can
hasn't
see-
changed.
You can see behind me, I have wallpapers as well.
Sorry for that. Keep going.
No.
He was called by the employees of the station, and he's talking to them through the landline phone, and we can see and diaries, notebooks. It could be a digital timer, and the table lamp. Looks like other small box looks like an ashtray. Okay.
Yeah, people
And
smoke
this
everywhere.
Everywhere, yeah.
Oh,
In the control room. If you were a Communist Party official, you could smoke anywhere, right?
No,
Ivan?
if you are anybody, you can smoke everyone. So really, it was allowed in the planes, everywhere.
Yeah, I remember seeing the ashtrays on the Aeroflot plane.
Yeah. So people just did not see anything bad, you know, in this. So the people smoke in kindergartens. Now
Yeah.
it's impossible. Now it's kind of different at all, you know. Now when I go to Europe, I'm shocked how many people smoke, because in
Yeah.
Russia I can spend a few days without seeing any smoking guy, you know.
Yeah. I heard Albania, Serbia, and those countries are all still smoking, like chimneys, everywhere, on buses, smoking.
But can you see this phone? Do you remember these disc
Yeah.
phones? Do you know?
I
how
like
it
those
works?
ones. It took forever to make a phone call. Imagine trying to ring a mobile now with 12 numbers.
When I was young and went to my school, I had to call my grandmother, and everything is okay.
Yeah.
And her number has like 3 nines.
Yeah,
And
3.
9 is
Come on.
yeah, 9 is the longest.
999 is the 911 call in England, in the United Kingdom and Ireland. That's the emergency number. 999.
And you know, you cannot speed up this disc. If you speed up, it gets like wrong. You call to another phone.
So you were an impatient kid.
Impatient, that's all. Yeah, I hated these lines.
But that was okay because the numbers only, you know, people's number only had 3 or 4 digits, you know. So we used to answer the phone like, hello, 8059. We used to answer the phone, but with the number.
Well, when I was young, it was 6 numbers in my town.
Well,
We have 7, yeah.
Yeah. And now it's 11, right?
And it was expensive. Calling back. It was very expensive at this time.
Very, very expensive. Yeah.
in Spain it was anyway.
Yeah, we used to have cheaper rates after 9 o'clock at night, so we would always call at nighttime after 9.
You mean these calls were expensive, right?
Yeah.
In
Yeah, but at nighttime, after 9 o'clock at night, or on weekends, the rates were a little cheaper.
Okay. It was very different Soviet Union. You know, you paid a lot when you mount this line, but after you pay nothing. So I remember my grandmother. It was very hard to call her because her phone was busy like every moment. She was
Always on the phone.
Always. So after an old lady in Soviet Union got the phone, she don't go to walk to park anymore. She's on the phone.
I tell you, when phones first came out in America, we didn't have a lot of phone lines, so we would have what we call party lines. A whole neighborhood, you know, maybe 10 houses would have one phone number. So when you dial that number, 10 phones rang in 10 different houses.
Wow,
and everybody would pick up and you'd say, I'm looking for Joe. And
Joe who?
And if you weren't Joe, you hung up, hopefully. So I remember those.
That sounds like fun. That sounds like good fun.
We did not have this, but we have split system. It's like 2 phones in one cable, but it doesn't mean that it's like a ring at the same time. But it does mean if your neighbor is calling, you cannot call.
Okay. It reminds me of I grew up in a bar, in a pub. Yeah, more or less, kind of. I grew up in a bar, my grandmother's pub. And the phone number of the pub, the whole neighborhood knew the phone number by heart, by memory. And they would call, it's my dad there.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Hi, Frank, your wife, your son's on the phone here. It was like a central, the central
switchboard.
Yeah.
You know everybody in town, and their husbands.
And all their bookies. We used to put on bets too.
Oh, God. Oh.
Okay, let me describe this picture. So there are people who is looking for this, northern, how we call glowing.
The glow,
the reactor. Yeah, they are
weird, eerie glow.
Eerie glowing, yeah.
Eerie is a good word.
Eerie, yeah. And they are drinking vodka. And I will tell you why. Yeah, no. This guy has a cup, and this cup is
it's a metal cup.
Metal cup, yep, exactly. And why he is doing this? It's not like a normal behavior, but people in that time, I heard this myth many times. I don't know is it true or not, but they believe that alcohol is against radiation. It helps against radiation.
Another myth about alcohol.
What do you think? Is it true or not?
It's good for
No.
all that ails you. It's a cure for everything.
Cure for everything, exactly. But I remember when I was young and started to work with computer, my grandmother told me, you have to drink a bit. I say, why? Because it's against radiation.
Yeah. Ivan, my darling, here, take a quick shot before work.
Before you start your job. Okay.
That's crazy.
Okay, Vasants, what is this? What is on the picture?
Looks like a submarine. Do you miss those old uniforms, Ivan?
We still have them.
But the Russian cops don't have the same uniforms.
No, cops don't, but military have the same. And you know why? Because Soviet Union made like millions of
They have there's a surplus of uniforms.
Yeah,
I say the Catholic Church also has a surplus of uniforms.
We can
priests.
sell them to Ireland or to America if you want.
You never know. Sorry, Vasanth. Excuse me.
Okay. I think this he is one of the board member and who's about to
Dingy. That's a great word.
he's meeting. He's going to the meeting hall. You can see-
It's not a meeting hall actually. It's a anti-nuclear shelter in case of war. Bunker. Yep, exactly. Have you noticed these doors? Have you noticed it? It has like this gate, like in submarine. How locker?
What are they called?
Steering wheel.
Teacher Lee will know. He has
Yeah,
more
we just call-
experience.
We just call it a hand wheel.
Okay. I don't think I have ever touched one of them. No, I haven't. In my life.
Submarines have them, but that's in our nuclear plant. We actually use doors like that on some of our earthquake-proof buildings. They're real big and heavy, just like on a submarine.
No,
Yeah,
I have never turned one.
But do you understand that it's not in the nuclear station? It's a like building outside somewhere. It's just a bunker, and it's a military one, and it has no relation to power plant. So that's why soldiers have.
But it looks like that door is nuclear explosion proof.
Exactly. It was anti-nuclear. You know, it's interesting. But in the movie, when they noticed radiation, what's the first word they say? They say no. They don't think about nuclear power plant. They say, "Is it Americans? We have to check." Yeah. So. Okay, so it was a bunker. We can see two soldiers, a big, like a protected door with this locker, handrail, something.
That's a handrail.
Handrail.
Yep, handrail.
And this device on the right, it's very fancy for 1980.
It looks like an alarm device. Green is safe and red is danger, I'm guessing.
Probably, yeah. And this
That might be a radiation detector right there.
Yep, maybe.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
there are a lot of writings in Russian, but they didn't say anything, you know.
Okay.
I mean, just abbreviation of something.
Open, close, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, open, close on the left, yes, and DC-17 means, I don't know what, just a number. Okay, we have only a few minutes, so I just scroll up through the pictures. So it's the meeting, and these two guys, they are opening gates to make water to cool the system, something like this.
Looks like a valve room.
Valve room, yeah. So because the automation unpowered, and they had to make it by their hands.
Yeah.
Okay, that is the glowing, Teacher Lee.
Well, some of that might be fire. The bottom is fire, but the top is radiation.
Yep.
I think we actually have a name for some of that. It's called the Cherenkov effect.
Cherenkov, okay.
Cherenkov, it's a Russian, Cherenkov,
Yeah.
I think Cherenkov effect or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Radiation makes things glow.
Mm-hmm.
Usually blue. I don't know why.
Okay, I don't know either. Okay, So I'm stop sharing because we are out of time. And thank you very much for this class, for this hangout. It was
Very
great,
informative.
as always. Very informative. We learned a lot. Thank you, Teacher Lee, for your expertise.
Thank you.
No problem.
Yeah, you know, always, please always join us. We are always happy when you join us. And probably we will do Chernobyl again, but not the next week. Next week, I've chosen another movie, some Wise, its name. I haven't watched it yet. So thank you again, and see you next week.
See you next week, guys. Have a nice week.
See you later.
Bye.